For 3 days, my sons let me believe they might be dead. Not busy. Not unreachable. Not stranded without a charger. They saw my name light up their phones again and again, watched their mother and me unravel from 1,000 miles away, and decided silence would teach us a lesson. I did not know that when I was standing in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, gripping a cold mug of coffee so hard my knuckles ached, imagining 2 state troopers on my porch. I only knew that my boys were in Florida, either of them had answered in 72 hours, and the kind of fear that once stole my father from me was crawling up my throat again. My name is Victor Alden. I am 52, live in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and run Anvil Biomed, a company that services hospital machines, MRI units, surgical lasers, ventilator systems, the quiet equipment nobody notices until it fails. I built that company from nothing because I knew what nothing felt like. My father deployed when I was 7 and never came home. So when my sons were born, first Nolan and then Travis 2 years later, I promised they would never feel that empty place in the house. I kept that promise for 25 years. Then, in late May, a boring letter arrived and showed me exactly what my promise had become. It was a lease renewal notice for Nolan's apartment in Brick Hill, Miami, a glass high-rise overlooking Biscayne Bay. I had co-signed 2 years earlier when he landed his first real job. My name, my credit, my guarantee. The renewal was due in 5 days, and the property manager needed one income detail confirmed before I signed. Simple. 30 seconds. I called Nolan from my office. Straight to voicemail. Hey, it's Dad. I've got the lease paperwork. Need to verify one thing before I sign. Call me back when you can. No big deal. By the next afternoon, nothing. I called again. Voicemail. A flicker of worry touched me then, because Nolan could be careless, but he had never ignored me for a full day. I called Travis, thinking he would know where his brother was. Voicemail. That night, my wife, Elise, noticed I had barely touched dinner. The boys are not answering, I told her. Either of them. They are grown men, she said gently. They get busy. I wanted to believe her. By the 3rd day, I could not. I called Nolan 7 times. Travis 5. No texts. No callbacks. The lease deadline was 48 hours away, but by then the paperwork barely mattered. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a wreck on I-95, a hospital hallway, Travis on the motorcycle he swore he had sold. The mind of a frightened father is a cruel projector. At 1 in the morning, I sat on the edge of our bed with my phone in my hand. Victor, come to bed, Elise whispered. Something is wrong, I said, and my voice cracked. 3 days, Elise. Both of them. That is not busy. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the same fear arrive in her face. Pack a bag, I said. We are flying to Miami. She did not argue. The next morning, we boarded the first flight out of Cleveland. Elise held my hand the whole way. Neither of us said the thing we were both thinking, please let our sons be alive. We landed after 2, rented a Lincoln Navigator, and drove straight to Brick Hill. Nolan's building rose above the street in glass and chrome. I handed the keys to valet with shaking fingers. On the 14th floor, the hallway was quiet until we reached his door. Then I heard music. Not the thin sound of a television left on. Music. Laughter. People celebrating. For half a second, relief almost knocked me down. Thank God. They were alive. Balloons were taped beside the doorframe. I knocked. The music dipped. Footsteps approached. The lock clicked. Nolan opened the door with a drink in his hand and a grin already dying on his face. What are you guys doing here? Not Dad. Not Mom. Not are you okay? I stared at him, trying to make my chest work. I have been calling. We thought something happened to you. Elise pushed forward, covering her mouth. Thank God, honey. We were sick with worry. Nolan rolled his eyes. It was not a small gesture. It was a performance, an exhausted little show of irritation, as if our terror had inconvenienced him. We didn't answer because we didn't want to talk to you, he said. Stop calling us. You're suffocating us. Stay on your own. 4 words can take 25 years and split them down the middle. Before I found an answer, a young woman stepped beside him, holding a pink drink and wearing the kind of smile that already believed it owned the room. Honestly, she said, do you two ever stop hovering? Elise blinked. I'm sorry. Who are you? The woman lifted her left hand slowly. A ring flashed in the hallway light. I'm Brooke, she said. Nolan's fiancée. And today is our engagement party, which you are ruining by showing up uninvited. Uninvited. Our son was engaged, and we learned it standing outside his door like strangers. Behind Brooke, people watched from a living room filled with streamers, flowers, and champagne glasses. My wife's grandmother's ring was back home in our safe, wrapped in a faded blue cloth, polished for 20 years for the woman Nolan would someday marry. Instead, Elise stood in a Miami hallway while a stranger told her she was ruining the party. Then Travis appeared behind them with a tray of food and groaned. Are you serious? He said. You guys couldn't let us have one day? The fear inside me began cooling into clarity. I did not come to ruin anything, I said. The landlord sent an urgent notice. Nolan's lease renewal deadline is tomorrow. I am the guarantor. I needed to verify one detail so he does not lose this apartment. I called both of you for 3 days. Travis laughed without humor. Here we go. The savior complex. You think because you signed a piece of paper you get to track us forever? Nolan leaned against the frame. Exactly. You use money and fixing things to keep tabs on us. We chose colleges far away because we needed space from your constant help. Then he said the sentence I would remember longer than all the others. We saw your calls. We purposely didn't answer. We wanted you to get the hint. Purposely. While I pictured hospitals and morgues, my sons were watching my name light up their screens and letting me suffer. Not by accident. Not from distraction. As a lesson. Brooke flicked her eyes toward the elevator. We are celebrating with people who actually matter. Please leave. I did not yell. Maybe part of me should have. Maybe they needed to see what they had broken. But I looked at my wife's face, pale and crumpling, and I knew the only person I owed anything to in that hallway was her. I took Elise's hand. Behind us, music started again before the elevator doors even closed. On the ride down, Elise cried without making a sound. In the car, halfway to the airport, she finally whispered, 20 years, Victor. I kept that ring polished for 20 years. I know, I said. I imagined telling her my grandmother's story. How she came from Poland with that ring sewn into her coat. I imagined welcoming someone into this family. Not that. Not being treated like an intruder. There was no answer big enough for that. The flight home was silent. Somewhere over Georgia, something inside me closed. I had given my sons everything I never had, and somehow they had learned to see love as control. By the time we landed in Cleveland, I knew one thing clearly. They wanted to be left alone. So I was going to leave them alone completely. We walked into our house a little after 10 that night. The silence felt different. It had teeth. Elise made it 2 steps past the front hall before her knees gave out. She collapsed on the living room rug and cried the way people cry when something dies. I got down beside her and held her. Where did I go wrong? I whispered. I gave them everything. Elise lifted her head, eyes swollen. You did not make them cruel, Victor. You gave them a life they never had to work for. People who never work for something do not always learn to value it. We sat there until nearly midnight. Then we talked, not in panic or rage, but like two people who finally understood the same truth. No more solo decisions. No more guilt softening us. Whatever came next, we would move together. At 8:02 the next morning, I called my attorney, Conrad Pike. "I need my name removed from Nolan's lease guarantee today," I said. "Before the renewal window closes." Conrad paused. "Once that lapses without your backing, the building will flag him automatically. There may be no grace period." "I know. You are sure?" "I have never been more sure." By 9:15, the withdrawal was filed. By noon, processed. At midnight, the renewal deadline passed without my signature. For the first time in 2 years, there was no Victor Alden holding up Nolan's apartment like an invisible beam. 2 peaceful days passed. Then Nolan called. "Dad, there's been a mistake," he said, trying and failing to sound calm. "The building says the renewal did not go through. There is no guarantor. They served a notice to vacate and added penalties. If this becomes an eviction, my record is destroyed. Brooke and I will not be able to rent anywhere." "There is no mistake," I said. "I withdrew as guarantor." Silence. "You what?" "Dad, you know I can't qualify on my own yet." "You told me to stay on my own," I said. "So I am. Please call them. Tell them it was an error." "It was not an error, Nolan." I hung up. They did not wait for a sheriff. They could not risk a formal eviction. I heard later that Nolan and Brooke spent 48 hours throwing clothes into garbage bags while security watched them load their lives onto luggage carts in the same lobby where his mother had been treated like an embarrassment. After that, I looked at every other thread tying my name to theirs. Nolan had a small business line of credit secured by my company's assets. I revoked authorization. The bank froze the draw and demanded new collateral within 30 days. Travis had a Jeep loan with me as co-signer. I notified the lender in writing that I would not cover future delinquencies. His credit alone could not carry the risk, so the bank demanded a restructure. I did not curse or threaten. I simply let banks and landlords see my sons without my shadow behind them. 3 weeks later, a yellow rental truck pulled up outside our house. Travis knocked like the door owed him money. Nolan stood behind him, pale, exhausted, no Miami shine left on him. I let them in and sat them down in the same living room where Elise had collapsed. Nolan cried first. "How could you do this to us? We're your family. You're ruining our lives over one argument." "One argument?" I asked. "You ignored your mother and me for 3 days while we feared the worst. You did it on purpose. Now the world is teaching you what your choices cost. You're a control freak," Travis snapped. "You want us to fail." "No," I said. "I want you to understand the words you used. If you do not need me hovering, you do not need my name on your apartment, my collateral for your business, or my signature on your debt. That is not revenge. That is adulthood." Nolan looked toward the kitchen. "Mom would never allow this. You're doing it behind her back." Elise stepped into the room, arms crossed, voice steady. "Your father and I are on the same page," she said. "We both agreed to honor your wish." For the first time, both of my sons looked afraid in a way that had nothing to do with money. They understood this was not a bluff waiting to be undone by tears. They argued. They blamed. They begged. But accountability never entered the room. When they left, the silence that followed did not feel like grief. It felt like peace. The next week, I sat in Conrad Pike's office again. "I want to rewrite the trust," I said. "How completely?" "If I die first, everything goes to Elise. If she dies first, everything comes to me. If we are both gone, nothing goes to Nolan or Travis." Conrad waited. "The estate goes to scholarships for children of fallen service members," I said. Kids whose fathers deployed and never came home. Kids who would give anything to have a father call and ask if they are okay. He did not argue. He just made the notes. My father was taken by a deployment that never ended the way it should have. I spent my life trying to become the man he never got to be. I thought that meant giving my sons everything. Maybe I gave them too much. Maybe they would have become this anyway. I do not know. What I do know is this: my legacy will not go to men who watched their mother cry in a hallway and called it independence. Months have passed. I hear Nolan and Travis live together in a small place outside the city now. No balcony over Biscayne Bay. No luxury lobby. Just bills with their own names on them and consequences that no longer arrive at my door first. Some nights, it still hurts. I will not pretend otherwise. A father does not stop loving his sons because he finally stops rescuing them. But when the ache comes, I remember that hallway. I remember Brooke telling Elise she was ruining a party she did not even know existed. I remember my sons saying they ignored us on purpose. Then I look across the back porch at my wife, coffee in her hand, sunset soft over our old yard, and I remember who stayed. My sons wanted their own lives. Elise and I have ours. And for the first time in years, that is enough.